Welcome to a speedrun of The Magic of Scheherazade. This is a great little mashup of genres, right, from the NES era. So you've got like Zelda-style exploration, JRPG-style like random encounters, there's puzzles, there's party members, an experience system, like different equipment that you can get, spells to cast, class system, and these weird like shooter-style boss fights. And yeah, I mean, it's really, it doesn't really find its niche, right? But I think it's a really great game anyway. And it, actually because of that, right? Because you get so much variety in gameplay. So it's broken up into 5 chapters. At the end of each chapter is a boss, the demon of that world. And you know, we were asked to start as a certain class. There's Saint, Fighter, and Magician. For the vast majority of this run, we're going to be Magician. They have access to the upgraded rod, basically. So right now we just have the rod. We will get other ones later, and the Magician actually takes advantage of that, whereas the Fighter doesn't. The Fighter gets upgraded swords and can take advantage of them, but the Magician can't take advantage of those. He can use them, but they just operate like the base sword, right? And then the Saint, that's true for both of them. But we have to be a Saint at one point in the game. We have to be a Fighter at one point in the game, so we're going to do a couple of class changes back and forth. One in Chapter 3 to Saint, and then back to Magician, and then one in Chapter 4 to Fighter, and back to Magician. And unfortunately that means like we're going to spend 300 rupees, 300 coins, on just class changes. We spend 240 on just healing items. We spend another 80 on like utility items. We spend a couple hundred on different upgrades, like going to the universities to get upgraded weapons and armor and stuff like that. So money is actually a really tight constraint in this. The good thing is you can borrow an insane amount at the beginning. You can borrow 500 coins at the beginning of the game, in whatever shop you want to go to, and money drops are fairly common. So we go up here, we cast Operon to reveal this door, and we're presented with the time door. We go back 50 years, and she said there you go back 50 years to find your companion Farouk. So the way that this game operates is that in each chapter you need to get, there's one companion that you need in order to actually fight the boss, and all of the other ones that you have to get you need in order to actually like get there, right? In order to actually do something else to get to that last person that you eventually need. We've got the university here, so you take a class in something called Moncom here, and that gives us the upgraded flame rod. And it doesn't look any different, but it actually does double damage of the base rod, and that will matter at the end of this chapter. We don't get any of them that don't matter. So you have side quests sometimes, or you have to make enough money in order to pay somebody to join you. Some of them ask you questions, and you have to give the right answer to the question. There's all sorts of different ways to get people to join you. Some of them just do it. And this game does a really good job of forcing you to complete the whole thing. There's only 2 major skips, 2 major characters that we skip, and you do everything else in the game, for the most part, and those characters are both in Chapter 2 because of a failure of the developers to make sure that you check that you had everybody in Chapter 2. You're actually able to skip about, I would say, 2/3 of it, 2/3 of the chapter. You still have to do a little bit of grinding in Chapter 2. We're going to do a little bit here. Coming up, we're about to enter this maze when we go down these stairs. And these enemies in here give you 5 experience apiece. Since we need to get up to 180 in here, this is a really good spot, right? Because they have so much experience. Now, 180 won't get us all the way to the level that we need, but it gets us in far enough that we don't have to spend any or a lot of time in the palace in the final dungeon of this chapter doing any leveling. We can just kill enemies as they're convenient, and we'll eventually hit the target experience value. So this old man here, he gives us the great magic of Moncom. We will eventually cast that in Chapter 4. You can only cast it when there's an eclipse. And the eclipses happen somewhere about 15 minutes after the start of the chapter. So the only eclipse that we're actually going to see is in Chapter 4. And what that spell does is it refills all of your items, which are in the bottom right there. And then there's some in the menu that don't show up there. It gives you full money as well. At that point, we don't need the money, but we do need the items. So it's really good, really convenient place to do it. There's one other great magic that we'll get in Chapter 4 in the palace, and it's like right before we get the eclipse, and we'll cast them both during that eclipse. Now, I said that there are random encounters, right, between certain screen transitions, or when you leave certain screens. Like that one. There's one. There's not actually a path from the maze, or from that bridge below the maze up to this town that avoids all encounter screens. It happens that the screen that we were grinding on down in the bottom of the maze, that one doesn't have an encounter on it, so you can safely move back and forth and respawn those enemies. Alright, so here is the shop, right? And we go to loan, and normally we were under the impression for a really long time that the maximum you could borrow was 400. And even if you were at 350 and tried to borrow 150, or even if you were at 300 and tried to borrow 150, it would just cap you at 400. Rebarbloot found out that if you have exactly a debt of 350 and request 150 of a loan, he'll give it to you. That's the only case that we know of where you can get more than 400, and so we definitely take advantage of that. We buy varying numbers of these items. The breads are kind of like an emergency HP source. So if you hit 0 HP, you eat a bread and you get 50 back. And the mashrooms are the same thing, but for MP. So I get 6 and 6 of those. Other players get different values, like 4 and 7. It just kind of depends on playstyle. And then we also picked up 2 carpets. We use one immediately after getting Farouk in the screen next to the shop to go back to the town where we got the flame, because it's faster than walking there. And then this allows us to go back just a couple screens over to the door, to the time door. So we're just backtracking here. Killing some enemies along the way if they're convenient, and, you know, we're trying really to not go out of our way here. Now, ideally, I'm going to leave this chapter with all 6 of my breads and mashrooms. And that means that I'm really limited in how much mana I've got, because you only get 16 to start with, and you don't have any way of refilling your mana without using mashrooms or staying at a hotel or an inn or something like that. And that costs money, and money is a premium, at a premium, so we don't do it. That means I have exactly enough MP to cast Operon to go to the past, cast Operon to go to the present. I have enough to get 2 healing casts off, which will give me 20 HP total, and then another 2 for a spell that you get at level 4 that doubles your defense. And I may end up using that on the final boss form to make sure that I don't drop below the bread count. Alright, so we needed Farouk in order to actually be able to fall into this North Cape so that we can come over here. We've got a little bit more shopping to do, and then we've got a companion to get, and then we'll hit the final or the Aqua Palace, final dungeon of this chapter. So yes, this town is underwater. These are mermaids. That's an old man. His name is Beckel, and if you talk to him in the past, when this town is not flooded, he tells you that he's never going to leave no matter what. And then you come here in the present, and in fact he never did. Incidentally, neither did the shopkeeper. But okay, so here's Kibaboo. Here's the next companion. He asks you if you've ever picked up a girl at a hamburger shop, and then you say no. And he joins you. If you say yes, he asks you to leave, and you have to come back, and it just wastes a little bit of time. So then we get out of the water by going down a set of stairs, and we jump right back in, go left, and here's the palace. Alright, everything here is pretty straightforward. We just need to get to 240 experience before the end of before the boss actually shows up. And these palaces are just a little bit of a maze that you have to go through. So yeah, here I'm gonna, I think, no, yeah. A little bit later I'm gonna do some leveling up. And I just picked up a money bag. So the money bags have 20 coins. We don't generally go out of our way to pick up single coins, but money bags are great because it's enough. It's worth walking kind of out of your way to get one. And so here we're going to do a grind. I need to kill 5 more of these dudes. Pick up an HP drink. And here's the horns that we bought in the town that has Kibaboo. That just lets you bypass these gargoyle enemies that you have to fight. Sometimes. It doesn't always work. Sometimes they get angry anyway, and you have to leave the room and come back in and try again. This is the first boss. This boss fight has 2 forms, like almost all of them. And yeah, so you kill the eyes here, and then eventually another form shows up. Now, ideally, you're supposed to get all the eyes on one side killed. I didn't, and I wasn't able to get them all on the second cycle either. So that's okay. Just wait until this guy finally opens his eye, and then we can hit him. And then we move into phase 2. And we need to hit these guys 5 times each. And there I ended up taking a little bit too much damage. Lost a bread. And that's chapter 1. Alright, moving on to chapter 2. This one's fairly short. We're going to move over here to the east and go north a little bit, and there's going to be some enemies that we can fight. They give us really good experience. They give 10 apiece, and we only need to get up to 740 here. So you can see these guys kind of... they're really hard to see. You just keep going back and forth until they show up. And then you step on the sand, and then they get all angry. We only need to be level 7 to beat this chapter. At level 7 you get the spell that you need to actually deal damage to the boss. And so with 740 experience, we're on our way. Most of the stuff that you have to do in this chapter is over to the east. We don't do it. We just come back to this first town, we start going left, get into the desert. What you need those other two companions for in this chapter actually is to get you through this desert maze. You need one of them in order to talk to the other, and then you need Gun Mecha in order to talk to Supika. And then Supika shows you the path through this desert maze, right? It's like the Lost Woods. But if you know the path, you can just take it. And there goes 2/3 of the chapter. Alright, in this next screen here, cast Operand to reveal this staircase, and there's a nice lady inside who gives us 50 rupees because she heard that we're going to fight Sabaron. And we need 340 rupees by the end of chapter 3. We need them like variously throughout chapter 3, but we need 340 by the end. There's another free 50 at the beginning of chapter 3. So all we need right now actually is like one money bag, and that gets us where we go. And here we are. So now we kind of don't have to worry about money. We additionally will need 180 in chapter 4. So any money bags that I see, I'm going to pick them up if I can, because during the grind, when we do that later, you're grinding for experience and money, but the experience grind is actually faster if you don't have to wait for money bags to appear. So north of here is the demon. We have to take a little detour. There's one last companion that we have to get. He's a funny looking little guy named Eppin. So Eppin joins us. We need 780 experience to get out of here. And one of the good things about these random encounters is you actually get 3 attempts to run before the first turn happens. So you kind of don't have to worry about it that much. I mean, it's definitely possible to get stuck in a fight, but most of the time it's not going to happen. Now, every time that it doesn't, of course, it costs extra time. Every time that you don't run, and just getting in the fight in the first place, even if you run immediately, costs like 4 seconds. Alright, so this is Curly. The first phase of Curly is just 8 consecutive casts of this spell, Flammel 1. And then if you don't have Eppin, phase 2 just doesn't show up. So you needed him to get past this, and you need a level 7 to even do this. Alright, so then Curly gets 6 arms. We're going to cast a couple more Flammels to deal damage to the arms, and then once any of them break, basically we're going to go and actually attack the arms with the rod. I want to make sure that when I leave here, I have 1 Mashroob left. It's very important. And when we get Curly down to the point where her energy bar is empty, we can actually cast another Flammel and finish her off. There we go, that's the end of chapter 2. Leveling up to the level cap for the end of the chapter automatically, and yep. Okay, so on to chapter 3. This is a long walk up to the door to the future. We're going to take a detour here to pick up some rupees, sorry. Pick up the 50 rupees to get us to the 340 that we need for the end of this chapter. And then we walk up to the next town, where we'll get an armor upgrade that permanently doubles our armor. That's 100 and... I think that's 100 of the rupees that we need. We need 100 for the boss, or for the final companion. We need 40 for the class change to Saint, which will happen in the same place that we get the armor. And then we need 100 for the class change back to Magician, for a total of 340. And lots of these sections, I mean, there are only so many different configurations of like trees and exits that this game can have, right? So a large part of this is just making sure that you remember where it is that you're going and where you've been, so that you don't accidentally, for example, walk up on that screen that looked exactly like it was leading to the free rupees. Once we get here, we go around to this lake and go north a bit to the town. We're actually going to be seeing a lot of this town, both in the present and in the future. So this old man, he tells us about the guy who gives us the spell Sprycom, but we're not actually going to get it. What we did that for is the armor. So we're now purple instead of blue. Take half damage from every attack. And now that spell Deafeny that I was saving 2 mana for at the end of chapter 1, it's basically useless at this point. Alright, and now we're just walking to the time door. Once we go through the time door, 30 years into the future, we have to find the Cimarron tree, which we're supposed to have talked to already, but another tiny little skip that you're able to do in this game is talking to the Cimarron tree in the present. because he asks us whether or not he promised to give us 3,000 rupees, and we say no, and then he asks us for a password. And if you just know the password, then you can type it in. And he gives you his firstborn son. He basically turns into Pinocchio. And then we're back on the path to the future version of Casimir, where we'll immediately change back to Magician. Just a hop, skip, and a jump over here. And into the mosque we go. Alright, so that's the class changes for this chapter done. That also means that we're done with Saint altogether. We need 100 rupees remaining for the rest of the chapter to recruit the last companion. But first, we have to go get Pukin. So this just is basically a long walk back to the original town, but in the future. Eventually we get there. Now that we're here, we can go over to this building here, and this guy will fashion a doll out of Pukin or out of the Cimarron's fruit. And here we go. Here's our new character. Carpeting back to that other town. Now that we've been to it, we can actually carpet there. So we carpet there and head over to the time door once again. Alright, now we have to head over here. Over to the west a little bit, to the time door, or to the maze, sorry. Now, if memory serves, this maze can't be navigated without Pukin. That's why we have to get him. He's what's giving us this little bit of light, so that we can actually see anything. But we're quickly through the maze. Pukin's usefulness is gone. We have to go over to the east a little bit. To pick up Mustafa, who costs 100 rupees to recruit, and then onto the palace. Now, since Troll, the demon of this chapter, is the winter demon, so he lives in the frozen palace. Here's one of these kind of shooter-like elements that I was talking about before. These wizard fights. It happens that that wizard is weak to a spell that we've got called Korbok, which turns him into a little baby. And then we have to fight a couple of these dragons to make some progress. Now, I'm trying to be careful here to make sure that I don't drop below to 0 bread. It's not going to be the end of the world if I get 0 bread. But we're going to take an intentional death at the end of this palace, but before we fight the boss, to refill our HP, so there's no point in refilling it now, right? And unfortunately, I take a hit. So I just have to be a little bit more careful in Chapter 4. It's not that big of a deal. Now this wizard, Mardul, is not weak to that spell. He's weak to the upgraded version of the spell that you get later. So we have to actually shoot him. It's not that big of a deal. This is the single level that we need for this chapter. And money bag drop is always good. The wizards have a tendency to drop money bags. So that means that we're going to need 6 money bags during the grind in Chapter 4 in order to get all the money that we need. And that's not too bad. So here we take an intentional death, we just walk right into the water. Refills our HP to 140. Now this fight, the boss is in these 5 different, illusionary forms, and Pukin makes him turn red, so we can tell which one it is, and then we can actually hit him. Every time you hit him, he counters with this spell called Thunder, right? It deals 10 damage if you have the R armor. We've got 140 HP. He takes 12 hits, he only counters 11 of them, because the 12th one kills this form. So when we get down to 30 HP, he'll switch to his second form, which basically can't hurt us. So we don't have to worry about HP. As long as you're at full when you get to this fight, and you know what you're doing, you kind of can't lose it. So just 2 more hits. We just need him to show up in either the 2nd or 3rd slot here, so the rod shot will hit him, and then the second one will automatically hit him as well. And then we just walk off to the side. His hitbox is kind of on whichever side of him is furthest away from you, it seems like sometimes. So you need to kind of get a rhythm for your shots so that they don't just go through his iframes. And anyway, that's chapter 3. So on to chapter 4. This one takes quite a while. It's about 20 minutes worth of chapter 4. A lot of it is a grind, but it's also just a long chapter and a long boss fight. But this is fairly straightforward. Like right now, all we have to do, we have to go get to this particular spot where, again, there's no encounter transitions for these two screens that have these enemies. There's lots of these enemies that show up, 6 on each screen, and they give you 10 experience each. Now they also have a tendency to drop items, right? So we still need those 6 money bags. What this grind allows us to do is actually get a little shy. It's at this point we need 3,800 experience. We need to get all the way up to level 19 by the end of this chapter. So this grind, as you can see, we're at 36 minutes, 37 minutes. We're going to leave this somewhere around 42, 43. And now we get to use the spell Ramapos. This is an amazing spell. It says I won't see any more enemies, but they still show up, including encounters, but it drastically reduces the appearance of enemies. It lasts for about 30 seconds after you leave the screen on which you cast it. So we cast it there, and it allows us to get all the way to the grind spot with like just a little bit of time left over. Picked up another money bag there, so we only need 5 now. 5 money bags and 3 loose coins, which will just happen. And here we are, we begin the grind. Now, north of this grind spot is the place where we need to go to get an upgraded rod, which will cost us 120 of the 180 that we need, and then we need 60 for a class change. I know we are going to switch back to Magician, and I said before that we needed 100 in Chapter 3 to switch back. But the great thing about the great magic that you get in this chapter is that it actually summons a mosque where you can change classes for free. You only get to use it once, so you have to be careful not to accidentally use it and pick like Fighter or Saint. But it avoids having to spend another 100 rupees and carpeting back and forth to various places. So now that I've got 120, I go up into this town here. We're going to go to another university, take the Moscom class, and get the crystal. We managed to get about 1,200, or exactly 860 experience, sorry. Of the 3,800 that we needed. So there's a lot left to do, and that's good because, that means that we get chances for money drops. The reason that it takes less time once you have all the money that you need is because you don't have to wait for enemies, like for their items to actually spawn, right? So once we've got all the money we need, we just go back and forth and kill stuff. And that goes on for several minutes. Alright, now that the grind is done, we get one last meaningless money bag to find. We cast Ramapas again to avoid some encounters, and we get to walk out. And we're good to go. On to the time door. We're going to pick up a companion on the way. We also have to do the class change to fighter on the way. So we're going to stop in this town on the way to the next companion. We need to be a fighter in order to pick up the last companion from this chapter, which is not the next one we're going to get, but it's just convenient to get them now. And you actually need him to get the other one. He allows you, much like Farouk allowed us to fall into the water and still breathe, he's going to allow us to fall into the lava in this town. Now we've got 27 rupees. We're not going to use them. We don't need them at all. We just need to get over to the time door. Get over to Goo Bibi first, and then to the time door. So now that we have Goobibi, walk over to the time door, open it up. Go 3,000 years in the past so that we can fight Salamander, the demon, for this chapter when he's a baby, because he's way too powerful now. Alright, so in this place, this is just another long kind of stretch of walking to get to the next town. In the lava pit. His name is Rainy. He's the rain shrimp. And he beats his rain drum and makes it rain on Salamander, which wakes him up. And then you fight him. Rainy asks you two questions if you're a fighter, right? He asks if you were scared of Salamander and you say no. He asks if you were scared of any monsters and you say no. And then he joins you. If you answer yes to either of those questions, it's just a game over. He says, yeah, you're right, we should just stop here. And then you stop and it's game over. If you're not a fighter, he just won't join you. Alright, now there's just a little bit of walking to do to get over to the palace. Now that we're here, we go up and fight another wizard. This is Warhammer, who is vulnerable to the upgraded version of Korbok that we got, which is called Shrink, which also turns him into a little baby. After a little bit more walking, we wind up in the room where you actually get the spell Moscom. Note I have to be kind of careful here, make sure I don't die. If I die, it's not the end of the world, but I'd like not to. Alright, so he gives us Moscom, and then we go as far as we can get to towards the room in which Salamander waits for us. We have to fight 2 more wizards who are not vulnerable to that shrinking magic, but they are vulnerable to attack spells. So we'll kill one of them with attack spells. Boltor 3 here. And then we've got another dragon. And see. We get a death that refills our HP. We just go in, fight the dragon. Fight one more Barzel. We got 1 cast of Boltor 3 and then we have to kill him with the rod. Solar Eclipse has shown up and that's fine. It actually lasts for quite a while. So when we get out of this room, we can immediately cast Moncom, which uses up 20 MP, but refills all of our items, so we're good to go. And then we can cast Moscom, and even though we didn't have 20 MP, we just eat a Mash Rube. Switch to Magician, so that we get the really good rod, which now has 3 shots each. 3 shots that can remain on screen at one time. And we get to the single worst boss fight in the game. Salamander. This is a nightmare. A good Salamander fight is like 2.5 cycles, right? That's what you're kind of aiming for. Because every time he has to slowly go down into the ground. Rainy comes out, makes it rain, he slowly comes up, and it costs about 40 seconds to get a new cycle to come out. But eventually he's down. And that's it for Chapter 4. Alright, now that we're in Chapter 5, we have to go into this first town here. The last companion of the game is just sitting in this town waiting for you. You don't have to pay him, you don't have to do anything, he just joins you. So we walk up here, talk to him. And this is Hassan. So Hassan joins us. We switch to the crystal rod and quickly go down to carpet. Just carpet straight back to the beginning of this town. It is slightly faster if you do both of those at the same time. It's slightly faster than walking all the way out, because you have to switch to the rod anyway. So if you're quick about it. You can save, I think, a second. Yeah, this is another nice long walk all the way down to the door to the past. We're gonna... take another stop in that town, Chigris. This is the same world as Chapter 4, by the way. So, now that we've changed the past and Salamander never happened, the layout is a little different, but we go to the town, Chigris, where we changed into a fighter in the last chapter, just to get it on the carpet list, so that we can carpet back there later, because we're going to do that twice. And then we go on to the time door. East over to where we got Gubibi in Chapter 4. Into that palace. And then we fight a couple of dragons here on the way up. And through another little maze. Now there are multiple ways through this maze. The route that I take through it actually avoids all of the encounters that you can get. There's a slightly faster route if you do get no encounters, but this one is more consistent. And we just walk all the way around this nice twisty passage to the time door. And here, what turned into, at the end of Chapter 4, what was looking like a PB run, got stymied. We run into this group of 3 Gorgons, and we get stuck for multiple turns, and they deal just an insane amount of damage. Eat away all of that time. And unfortunately, there's not really enough left of the game to even make it up. But now that we're out of that, get to the time door. We go back to this place. This is the only place that exists in the past, is this, or from here at least, this is the only place, this weird little palace. So we walk through here, we kill a couple of these guys because they give us some good experience. We need to get to level 21 by the end of the chapter. So we kill a couple of them on the way. Walk through that jar and cast a Ramapos that will hopefully avoid encounters. There are 6 encounter transitions that we go through. There's 1, 2, 3 in here to get the Legend Sword. The best sword in the game, which we will actually not equip at all. And then just walk right back out. Back to the time door. Where we carpet back to Chigris and take a little route back a ways towards the first town. Over here to the east a bit, and up around. To these trees. These trees are really kind of wonky, right? Walk in between them and they create this light bridge. If you have that sword. That's why we have to get it, even though we don't use it. And then in here we get another armor upgrade. So we found the blue ring, or armor, whatever. Back in chapter 3, now we've got the red ring. Our damage intake is a quarter of what it was at the beginning of the game, or half of what it just was. And then we have to go all through this all again, almost all the way back to the door, to the time door. Alright, but instead of going left here, we go up into the Light Palace. Now this is fairly straightforward. Get into another Gorgon fight, which is kind of scary. Manage to escape. And then we just kind of hug this right wall for a little bit, and then make our way over. We've got another Martel fight, but this time we have the upgraded Shrink spell, so we can turn him into a fly. And then down here, into the room where Sabaron awaits. But, and this is great, this is what I love about this game. There's a little twist right at the end. Sabaron's made this terrible mistake. He's summoned this demon, but he can't control it. So he cuts a deal with you. He'll give you the princess if you'll go beat this demon that he can't kill. But you have to break the spell that he cast on her and tell him what her name is. In a little bit of a story spoiler, actually major story spoiler, she's been with you the whole time. She's the time spirit that's been following you around. So now she's free. We get the final rod of the game. Now there's one last Barzel fight here, but he is also weak to the upgraded Shrink spell. He turns into a hamburger, and then you just step on him. Cast one more Ramapas to avoid the particularly dangerous final encounter. Which comes on this screen right here. And we're into the Dark World. Now this is another kind of desert-style maze, so you know that you're going the right way as long as these bubble walls stay red. So you make your way around east, north, or north, east, northwest, north, north, north. You arrive at these pillars. Shoot one on the left, shoot one on the right. Shoot one in the middle. And Gora Gora shows up. Now this fight is particularly dangerous. It's really easy to lose this fight if you don't know what you're doing. But all you have to do is hold left and spam Boltor. So you get 5 casts of Boltor off to get to his second form. On the fourth one, he casts this transformation spell. It's not a big deal. You just get, or sorry, on the third one, you just get the fourth and fifth ones in. He goes away. You get transformed back to normal. And you just have to hit this little circular thing that's floating around. He eventually changes back, so you want to stay on the left side of the screen as much as you can. And then just repeat. Hold left, spam Boltor. Eventually he shows up one more time in the circular form. And there you go. That's the magic of Scheherazade. Now there's some great little bits here at the end. I mean, the music in this game is fantastic in general, but in particular this end bit is awesome. But everybody kind of gets their say, right? You talk to the king, you talk to the 4 daughters, you talk to all of your companions, all that kind of stuff. The king asks you what you want to do, and you tell him it's kind of like Dragon Warrior. You tell him that as long as you breathe, you'll continue your adventure. And you just leave. Get on the carpet with all of your companions and fly away. Alright, so thanks for watching. This has been great. This is, again, the magic of Scheherazade. I hope you enjoyed it.